Haas received his BA in Ancient Near East History from the University of Michigan, then attended Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, where he was ordained as a Reformed rabbi in 1974. After ordination, he served as an active U.S. Army chaplain for 3 years. And upon completion of that duty, Rabbi Haas enrolled in the graduate program of religion at Brown University, earning a PhD in Jewish Studies in 1980. He then joined the faculty at Vanderbilt University. He taught courses in Judaism, Jewish ethics, the Holocaust, Western religion, and Middle East conflict. Joined the faculty of the Department of Religious Studies at Case Western Reserve in January of 2000. Was appointed chair of the Religion Department in 2003. He served as visiting professor at Spertus Institute of Jewish Studies in Chicago. Has published several books and articles dealing with moral discourse of Jewish and Christian thought after the Holocaust. And I know many of you are familiar with Professor Haas's work already at the college. He served as a faculty member on our Kodesh Limud program for a number of years, and I believe he's going to do that again this year. We're pleased to have him back. Please enjoy tonight's program, Professor Peter Haas. I will allow him to plug the program we're running on stage today.
Before I get started, I have one more commercial. Dr. Vanessa Ox from the University of Virginia is going to be on campus tomorrow afternoon at Case Western Reserve University. She's scholar in residence at the Temple, but we have always partnered with them. She will be speaking on campus tomorrow at 4:30 in the afternoon on medicine and multiculturalism, decoding Jewish patients. So if you happen to be free tomorrow afternoon, 4:30, this will be in Clark Hall. You've seen the Temple said Mather House. Ignore them, I'm correct. It's Clark Hall, 4:30 for Vanessa Oaks, decoding Jewish patients. Well, first of all, I want to thank you and Siegal College for inviting me here this evening to talk about this topic. As everybody can hear me?
Use the microphone.
Now everybody can hear me. Okay. As Professor Amkram said, I've taught courses in Western religions and the Middle East conflict for a number of years. Before I even came to Cleveland 10 years ago, and it's something I've just kind of kept up doing. So you're going to see in a very short period of time, usually it takes me 14 weeks to touch on. So this will be, I'll try not to go too fast or be too intense. It's a very complicated topic, but I'll try to give you at least an introduction as to what's going on with some of these radical Islamic groups. And I can say at the beginning, if I have two takeaway points, they would be, first of all, meaning we as Jews or Israel, are not their primary targets. I'm not saying we're not a target, we're just not a primary target. And the other is that it's an extremely, there are lots of Salafi groups, and they hate each other pretty much as they hate anything else. So it's hardly like there's radical Islam as a big monolithic thing. But you'll see what I mean as we get going. What I've got here on this, and I'm sorry about the size of the screen, but there's nothing I can do about it. The Salafia is really the overarching name for all of these movements. The word comes from the Arabic word Salafi, which refers to the first 3 or 4 generations of Muslim leaders. In other words, after Muhammad died, there was, if you can imagine, a leadership crisis. The Prophet is gone, and now what do you do? And Islam, by the time the Prophet had died, was no longer restricted to Mecca and Medina. It was growing throughout the peninsula and was ready to kind of spread out. So leadership was an issue, and there was no real good, concrete way of appointing successors to the Prophet. So a number of people got appointed in one way or the other. It's rather controversial in early Islam is how that happened. Islam has always had a succession problem. But under the first 3 or 4 successors, called Khalifs, so successors, the Islam spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula, up into the Middle East, across North Africa, and as far east as what's now Iraq and Persia. So this was all in 10 or 15 years. So it was really quite quickly. The fourth imam after Muhammad was Ali. He was a cousin of the Prophet. He was also married his favorite daughter, Aisha. And there were many people in Islam who thought that Ali really was the natural follower. He was part of the Prophet's family, part of his tribe, all of that. A civil war broke out when it came his turn to be the leader of the community, and he lost. And he and his sons were eventually killed in battle, and all of this happened in what's now contemporary Iraq, in towns like Karbala and Najaf. So that's why those are such hot spots between Sunnis and Shia in Iraq. They really were the beginning bloody battles in which Ali was killed, and the Shia followed Ali and regarded him as the true prophet. Anyway, this first couple generations are what's the Salafi. And as I'll show you in a moment, what's happened in Islam is, beginning already in the 14th century, a sense of losing their way, that things weren't going right, and that the way to restore the glory of Islam and Islamic civilization was to go back to the way it originally was. When it sort of worked the first time, what my Protestant friends would call restoration theology, right? Go back to the early church. So they're going back to the early mosque, I guess we'd say, the early community. And the real heroes, the real leaders, the people whose lives were exemplary were the Salafis. And so this is where the movement gets its name from. I say here, and you can't read it, I know, that they drew very heavily on the preachings of a medieval scholar named Ibn Taymiyyah, and I will explain him in a moment. He's extremely important. He's the thinker behind all of this. But what I can tell you, they stress very strict, conservative interpretation of Quranic law. Right now, the Quranic law, Sharia, is like halakha. Right? There are lots of ways of interpreting it. From Ibn Taymiyyah, we get a very conservative, what we might call Haredi interpretation of the Sharia. And that's what they insist on. And I'll come back to that in a moment. What they also are very fearful of, for obvious reasons, is the West. They see it as degenerate, as un-Islamic, as materialistic, as rational, as godless, as secular, as seductive, in the bad sense, all kinds of things. So if you're going back to a restoration of the Salafi, pure Islam, the West is your worst nightmare. And that's another real hallmark of the Salafiyah. And some, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit after my remarks, really want to return and have a caliph again. Have a united Muslim empire under a caliph, or caliph, I guess we say. All of this, I should tell you, is very controversial among Muslims. I mean, forget us. But Muslims, by and large, do not want to live in the 7th century any longer, according to very strict Sharia, in which you get your hands chopped off and all of this. So, as scared as we are of these movements, Muslims are even more scared, or the vast majority of them are. And they're much more affected. And if you just heard the news today out of Afghanistan and Pakistan, you know that they're targets as well. So I'm going to really talk about Ibn Taymiyyah and then how he came out into the modern world. And hopefully this will work. Yeah. As you can kind of see the map, what I'm trying to show you in the green is roughly where Islam was centered in the medieval world, and the gray, not the gray, the sort of beige around it is the non-Islamic world.